Hello everyone, and welcome back to this retrospective series on the legions and their Primarchs. I am the Darklight Emissary, here to guide you through a brief overview of each legion and their Primarch. And whether you are new or not, I welcome you to this series, and I hope you gain a bit of insight from it. This episode is on the 18th Legion and their Primarch, the Lord of Drakes, Vulkan. Now, this legion is one that I don't know how long this one will be. It'll probably be maybe a little bit shorter because the Salamanders have kind of been done dirty during the Heresy and Crusade era. There's not been a ton written on them. However, they do play an important role, so it's not like they're less important by any means. But the overall content that I've read about them is more limited than some of these other ones, and some of the more recent stuff as well. So, that being said, the Legion itself is one of 3 legions during the Great Crusade and Unification Wars era that was held back in secrecy by the Emperor for unknown reasons. The other 2 being the Space Wolves and the Alpha Legion, and it's not quite known exactly why. However, the gene seed for the Salamanders is less corruptible than others. It has better regeneracy potential, things like that. So perhaps their more robust gene seed is the reason why, and they were held back in reserve for specialist roles like the Wolves were in the Alpha Legion, although it's less obvious what it is for the Salamanders. The Salamanders were also one of the smallest legions during the Great Crusade. They never really gained a gigantic amount of Marines like the Word Bearers or Ultramarines did, but they could hold their own. And one of the unique traits about the Salamanders is most of them are good at smithing gear. So most Salamanders can repair their own gear, and even if they have the time, create their own gear for themselves without having to have a specialist tech marine or smithing artificer create it for them. So one of the main sticking points of the Salamanders is they believe in what's called the Promethean Cult, which pretty much its tenets surround self-reliability and tenacity, things like that. So the Salamanders might be less in overall amount, but you get more bang for your buck with them. Individual Marines are better equipped and more powerful in combat than perhaps the more populous legions are. And that goes a bit for Vulkan as well. So Vulkan as a Primarch is quite a bit different from his brothers. As far as physicality, he is considered the biggest Primarch, bigger than all of them apparently. He's reputed to be able to flip over battle tanks with his bare hands, things like that. But beyond that, even though he's known for his raw strength, his personality is not like Angron or like some of the more bloody-minded Primarchs. He is a lot more subdued and a lot more of a thinking Primarch than some of the others. He is more in touch with his humanity than the other Primarchs. He spent his formative years living in a small village, and that is a tradition that the Salamanders themselves also keep up into the modern era. They, if they're not fighting, they don't just stay isolated in a fortress monastery away from normal people with a handful of serfs serving as their interaction with anyone human. The Salamanders actually go back to their hometowns that they are from and serve as chief elders for their tribes. And so they have a lot more humility and a lot more love for regular humans and don't see themselves necessarily as some kind of elevated god above men like some legions did. And so that makes them considered one of the probably at the top for best legion to talk to as a normal human or run into. That being said, they are still Space Marines, and Vulkan is still a Primarch, so they can be absolutely fierce in battle, and they are shown to be that several times. One of the other unique traits about the Salamanders is that they tend to use a lot of flame weapons, artifice weapons, and other unique weapons that they create on their own. However, they are just as capable as other legions in, hand-to-hand combat and other sorts of fighting that you see other legions do, like most legions are. They might specialize in one thing, but they're good at most things that they put their mind to. And so during the Great Crusade, the Salamanders were often probably not known for bringing a ton of worlds into compliance. They were kind of scattered through being support for other legions, I'd say, most of the time. Vulkan himself did not immediately join his legion and was at the Emperor's side for years before joining his legion. And even after joining his legion, Vulkan did not rule his legion with an iron fist. He actually knelt to his men and said, I will serve you. And so that puts Vulkan and the Salamanders at the top of my list for a legion I would choose to be a Space Marine in, because I'm pretty sure, like, for example, if you were a line Space Marine in the Emperor's Children, you were probably not permitted to speak directly to Fulgrim. That was seen as against their rules, I'd say. There was a lot of it was something I didn't bring up in theirs, but they had positions called Lord Commanders, which were like near the top, that served Fulgrim directly. And one of the Lord Commanders, Eidolon, told a line captain, "You'll never ascend to this level. You're not allowed to," basically. So they had very strict rules that way. Whereas I imagine with the Salamanders, even your lowest level Marine could probably approach the Lord of Drakes and get his advice on something. Vulkan would probably allow anyone to talk with him, which I can appreciate. And so during the Great Crusade, they did serve with honor and prestige, but they were mostly, I would say, a support legion compared to some of the more aggressive and upfront legions like Horus's Legion, the Ultramarines, things like that. And by the time of the Heresy, this legion was one of the 3 legions that tried to bring Horus and the initial traitors to justice on Istvan V. As previously mentioned with the Iron Hands, that did not go so well for these 3 legions, and so the Salamanders were utterly decimated in crossfire between the traitors and the formerly thought to be loyalist arrival of the other traitors. And they fought valiantly, they fought hard, they fought powerfully for being outgunned and outnumbered, but eventually they were chewed down to nearly nothing, and Vulkan himself disappeared in a volley of nuclear fire fired from the Iron Warriors Legion. But Vulkan found himself still alive somehow and fighting hordes of traitors all around him who, would basically dogpiled him and knocked him unconscious. And Vulkan spent the next little while as a prisoner to the Night Lord's Primarch, Conrad Kurtz, aboard his Gloriana class battleship. And he was put into a maze created by Perturabo of the Iron Warriors for a while, and basically tormented by Conrad. And this is where we find the unique trait for Vulkan. Vulkan is what's known as a perpetual, meaning that if he dies, he will regenerate back to full health near immediately upon death. And Conrad was the first one to witness this, because Conrad tried many times to kill Vulkan. One thing that is of note is the Night Lords, and I guess mostly Conrad, really despised the Salamanders' love for humanity, because the Night Lords kind of spite humanity and hate it. So Conrad saw in Vulkan everything that he wished he could be, and so he hated Vulkan and tried to make Vulkan think he was the same as Conrad. It didn't work out for him, though. And eventually, Conrad made the final error of allowing Vulkan to get his Warhammer back. And his Warhammer had a teleportation beacon in it, and Vulkan used it to get out of there. And Vulkan found himself on Macragge with Robot Goleman, broken of mind and spirit, but not of body, of course. And very long story short, Vulkan ends up getting revived back on Nocturne, where he's from, to full health and mental faculties. And he does not announce himself to the remnants of his legion, though. He is found by 3 of his legion and he swears them to secrecy, and then he takes them down into the depths of Nocturne, and they go through the webway, and they find their way through the webway to the embattled gate leading into the Imperial Palace. And Vulkan had found himself having made a device called the Talisman of Seven Hammers through the Emperor wielding his mind and body to create the Talisman of Seven Hammers. Vulkan doesn't remember making it, but he knows that the Emperor used him to make it. And so he's led back by the Emperor through the webway, and he gets into the throne room of the Emperor and installs the Talisman of Seven Hammers onto the golden throne. And basically what this device is it is a failsafe that if the forces of chaos ever make their way into the Imperial dungeon and finally overcome the Emperor, the talisman will detonate in basically a holy fire holocaust type of thing. And it will permanently burn out a large portion of the Chaos God's very souls. So it's kind of like a final, shaking your fist at your enemy type of thing that will permanently scar them, if not defeat them, for, them finally overcoming you. So after that, Vulkan kind of becomes the Emperor's bodyguard for the rest of the Heresy. There's a couple other things I won't bring up because they're in the latest book, and I won't spoil that for you. You should go read Echoes of Eternity if you want to learn more about Vulkan and what he's up to in the rest of the Heresy. But going back to his Legion, of course his Legion was diminished to nearly nothing after Istvan V, and his Legion mostly was scattered to different small faction groups, Black Shield groups, things like that, fighting guerrilla warfare against the traitors for the rest of the Heresy. And after the Heresy, Vulkan and his Legion reunite and take part in the Scouring for a while, chasing the traitors back into the Eye of Terror, as the other loyalists also did, as we previously talked about. Now, for about 3,000 years after the Heresy, Vulkan did lead the Salamanders, and then he did disappear for a time. And then during what's called the War of the Beast, where a gigantic army of orcs showed up and attacked the Imperium, Vulkan was sighted again, fighting orcs on a specific world, and the nascent Imperium asked for his aid in defeating the Beast, which was a 30-foot tall orc, almost Krork status, very powerful individual, and they wanted his help in defeating it, and Vulkan agreed. He came back to the Imperium and led Imperial forces to Ulanor, where this orc had staged his fighting, and Vulkan was able to fight this orc and detonate a WOG engine and kill the beast, and he disappeared into that explosion. And of course the Imperium probably did not know about Vulkan's perpetuality. I imagine that was kept under wraps and secret, so Vulkan is not dead, although they figured him dead at this point, and he did not return to his Legion after this point. And so the Salamanders probably do know of his perpetuality, but it's kept secret probably by the top leadership of the Salamanders. And the Salamanders believe that he will return in a end-time scenario for a final battle against the forces of chaos. Just like the Space Wolves believe Russ will show back up in that time. And Vulkan had, in his time, created many different devices, being a master smith as one of his main traits. And he left 7 of them scattered around. I believe it's 7. It could be 9. I had just read it, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. You can correct me in the comments if you feel like it, but there's several artifacts strewn around, and the Salamanders are looking for them. And if they find all of them, they believe that's when Vulkan will return. And so Vulkan is out there somewhere. We don't know what he's up to or why he has not returned to the Imperium. But there is no signs in the 40k era of him being one of the ones imminently returning. Most of the community, myself included, still believes that either Lemon Russ or the Lion will be the next loyalist Primarch to return to the Imperium. Slight chance for Korax, I guess, but we'll talk about that in the next video because they are the ones up next. We've got the Raven Guard and Korax up next. So the Salamanders in the 40k era have been a smaller group. There's rumors that Vulkan did not like the Codex Astartes because his legion was so small. He didn't want to break his up at all, and they didn't really break up to begin with because they were so small when the Codex Astartes was established by Robot Goleman. And there are rumors that a few chapters did get made with their gene seed, but it's not confirmed at all. And then by the time of the 42nd millennium dawning, with Robot Goleman's return, you have the Primarchs Marines and gene seed from all the legions available. And several of those Primarchs chapters are Salamanders' origin. So the Salamanders are in resurgency because of that. And the Salamanders have done their level best to continue being champions of humanity in a regime that often spites them and hates them for their general humanity. That's an interesting note to point out. The Salamanders are often kind of hated by their own faction for often sparing people and being that comforting, in touch with their humanity Space Marine force. This has brought them into conflict with other Space Marine chapters that want to, employ more hostile means. Like, for example, I believe it was on Armageddon that, of course, they clashed with none other than the Marines Malevolent, which that name doesn't tell you anything about them. They are colossal jerks and basically are opposites to the Salamanders. And I'm pretty sure that the Salamanders, at least the leader of the Salamanders, came to blows with the leader of the Marines Malevolent detachment there over, sending artillery at civilian positions just to crush a few enemies type of scenarios. So that's kind of how the Salamanders have led themselves without their Primarch over the millennia after his disappearance by, raising that flag of, trying to be better than your other Space Marine chapters as far as, their attitude towards people and towards how they treat them. And that is really about it for this Legion, I feel like. One of the other interesting notes about them, since we saw some time here for this one, is that they had, I think, some more prototype weaponry than other Legions did. One of the break-off groups during the Heresy was led by a Dreadnought and former leader of the Salamanders. And the Dreadnought suit that this Broken Marine wore was rumored to have been created by Vulkan himself and seemed to have innate regenerative abilities. So this suit of armor, the suit of Dreadnought armor, could self-repair itself over time. And it was found with its occupant in the sands of Isfahan 5 when some Salamanders went back to explore it and find evidence of their Primarch and anything else about their Legion. And so that's interesting to note. They have plenty of a lot shinier gear than other Legions and other chapters later on do, which kind of sets them apart and makes them an interesting Legion. I do like their color scheme and armor style. Most of their armor looks way more unique and stylized than a lot of other Legions due to this ability to have most of their men be some level of warsmith on top of being warriors. So that's really about it here. So as always, please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. We've got the 19th Legion up next, and I look forward to doing that with you. And as always, bring your light into the dark places and have a great day or night wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in, and see you in the next one.